Imagine for a moment that a day arrives, your birthday, and yet instead of excitement you feel a subtle discomfort. No desire to gather people, no wish to blow out candles, no appetite for celebration. You quietly let the day pass, as if it were any other. Some people might find that strange, even sad. But is it really? Or could there be a deeper psychological truth hidden behind the silence of those who choose not to celebrate their own existence? Today we are going to dive deep into the psychology of people who don't celebrate their birthdays, a topic rarely explored but profoundly revealing about the human mind. By the end of this video, you'll see that what might seem like indifference or melancholy is often something far more meaningful, even powerful. Stay with me until the end, because the last insight we'll uncover is the most profound of all, capable of transforming the way you understand yourself and others. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video if these topics resonate with you. Here we explore the hidden depths of psychology, philosophy, and human nature. Timeless wisdom designed to help you grow, awaken, and understand the world from a higher perspective. And I promise you, what you're about to discover might change how you view not only birthdays, but the entire idea of celebration, self-worth, and time itself. Let's begin by asking the first essential question: why do we celebrate birthdays at all? Across most cultures, birthdays represent more than a simple date on a calendar. They're milestones of identity, affirmations of existence. From childhood, we're taught that this day should bring joy, attention, and gifts. But for many people, something feels off. The ritual no longer aligns with how they perceive life. The excitement fades, replaced by an internal whisper. What am I really celebrating? Psychologists suggest that the avoidance of birthday celebrations is not necessarily a symptom of depression or low self-esteem, though it can be in some cases. Often it's an act of introspection, even quiet rebellion against societal norms. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, once wrote that the individual's journey towards self-realization often involves stepping away from collective expectations. In that light, refusing to celebrate can become a symbolic declaration of independence, a way of saying I no longer need validation to feel alive. Think about it. Every birthday reminds us of time, of the years that have passed and those that remain uncertain. For some, this awareness is unsettling. They prefer to avoid the confrontation with mortality, aging, and the invisible weight of expectations. Others, however, see it as sacred. They reject the surface-level celebration not out of sadness, but because they sense that life's meaning cannot be captured by balloons and cake. To them, existence is too profound, too mysterious, to be reduced to a party. Philosophers like Søren Kierkegaard believe that most people live in distraction, constantly avoiding silence and depth. A birthday, when stripped of noise, becomes a mirror, reflecting back who you truly are, what you've become, and whether you're truly living in alignment with your authentic self. Some people are simply not ready to face that reflection. Others have already looked deeply enough and they no longer need to prove or perform. Ask yourself, when was the last time you spent your birthday entirely in silence, reflecting instead of celebrating? Would you feel peace or discomfort in that solitude? Your answer might tell you more about your psychological landscape than you think. But beyond introspection, there is another layer, a cultural one. In many societies, birthdays are strongly tied to consumerism and social validation. The bigger the celebration, the greater the perceived self-worth. Social media amplifies this illusion. Likes and comments become digital applause for existing. Those who step away from this ritual are, consciously or not, rejecting that system. They choose authenticity over performance, and that choice requires courage. Existential psychologists such as Viktor Frankl argued that true meaning arises not from pleasure or recognition, but from purpose. Perhaps those who don't celebrate their birthdays intuitively understand this. Their sense of identity is no longer tied to external validation, but to inner growth, self-knowledge, and authenticity. They find meaning not in being celebrated, but in becoming, in continuing to evolve quietly, without the spotlight. Yet, there's also vulnerability in this posture. For some, not celebrating can be a form of emotional protection, a way of avoiding disappointment, loneliness, or painful memories. Maybe their birthdays remind them of absent people, lost love, or childhood moments that never felt as joyful as others believed they should be. The avoidance, then, is not defiance, but defense, a tender boundary drawn to guard the heart. This complexity, the mixture of strength, introspection, and hidden pain, makes the psychology of non-celebration so fascinating. It reminds us that silence can be both a refuge and a declaration, a wound and a form of wisdom. And as we continue, we'll explore how these inner motivations evolve with age, experience, and personal awakening, and what they reveal about the deeper layers of human consciousness. Would you say you celebrate your birthday to connect with others, or to reassure yourself that you matter? The answer might be more revealing than you expect. From a psychological standpoint, our relationship with our birthday evolves as we age. It's not static. In childhood, a birthday is pure magic. The universe seems to revolve around us for one glorious day. We are affirmed, celebrated, surrounded by affection and gifts. It's one of the first times we experience the feeling of being special. But something changes as we mature. We begin to notice the gap between that early ideal and the reality of adult life. The magic fades, and the day begins to feel different, sometimes heavier, sometimes emptier. What once symbolized joy can become a mirror reflecting the quiet unease of growing older. Sigmund Freud suggested that human beings are driven by unconscious conflicts between the desire for pleasure and the awareness of limitation. A birthday exposes that conflict perfectly. It reminds us of our mortality, our progress, and the dreams still unfulfilled. For many people, that confrontation is not something to celebrate, but something to process. The refusal to celebrate, then, can become a subtle act of emotional honesty, a way of facing time without illusions. Carl Jung would have called this the moment when the persona begins to crack. The mask we wear for society starts to feel uncomfortable. As we evolve, our consciousness moves from the outer world of appearances to the inner world of essence. Jung described this as the path toward individuation, the process of becoming whole. Those who stop celebrating their birthdays may be responding to this inner call. They begin to feel that true celebration doesn't come from attention or parties, but from authenticity, from living a life aligned with one's soul. But there's a paradox here. While some people reject birthdays to escape social pressure, others avoid them because they can't bear the silence. They fear that, if no one remembers, it might mean they're invisible, that their life has lost significance. This fear reveals something profound about the human condition, our need to be seen, acknowledged, and valued. As the philosopher Martin Buber wrote, "All real living is meeting. We exist in part through our relationships." So when a birthday passes unacknowledged, it can feel like a quiet erasure of the self, a psychological wound that reminds us how fragile our sense of belonging can be. At the same time, some people find deep peace in anonymity. They don't crave the validation of others because they've cultivated a strong internal world. They measure their life not by applause, but by meaning. For them, the absence of celebration is not emptiness, it's liberation. They have learned to honor themselves privately, without external witnesses. This quiet self-respect can be one of the purest forms of maturity. They no longer need to prove they are alive. They simply are. Modern psychology supports this idea. Studies on intrinsic motivation, our inner drive to act from genuine interest or purpose, show that people with high intrinsic motivation often detach from social rituals that no longer align with their values. They prefer authenticity to conformity. Their satisfaction doesn't come from social approval, but from living according to their inner truth. In this sense, not celebrating one's birthday can be an expression of psychological autonomy, a declaration that I define my own meaning of life. Still, we must also recognize the emotional complexity behind this choice. Sometimes the avoidance of birthdays stems from unprocessed emotions, grief, guilt, or unresolved trauma. For example, someone who lost a loved one near their birthday may associate that day with pain. Another might carry memories of feeling forgotten, rejected, or misunderstood. For them, avoiding the celebration is a way to protect themselves from re-experiencing old wounds. It's not apathy, it's survival. The silence becomes a shield. What's fascinating, though, is how two people can perform the same behavior, not celebrating, for entirely opposite reasons. One does it from a place of awareness, inner strength, and spiritual maturity. The other does it from fear, sadness, or emotional fatigue. Outwardly, they look the same, but inwardly, they inhabit very different worlds. This is why we must be careful not to judge. When someone says they don't celebrate their birthday, we should not assume they are unhappy. Often they are simply living according to a rhythm that others haven't yet understood. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre believed that we are condemned to freedom, that each of us must give meaning to our own life. In that sense, choosing not to celebrate a birthday can be an act of existential authorship. It's a way of taking responsibility for how we engage with time. Instead of following tradition blindly, we ask ourselves, what does this day truly mean to me? That question alone marks a leap in consciousness. There's also a spiritual dimension to this. In some mystical traditions, the soul's birthday isn't the day we are born, but the day we awaken, the day we realize who we truly are beyond our physical form and identity. From that perspective, refusing to celebrate the body's birth isn't denial, it's transcendence. It's the quiet acknowledgement that what is essential in us was never born and will never die. But that raises a challenging question for all of us. Have we mistaken ritual for meaning? Do we celebrate because it brings genuine joy, or simply because that's what everyone does? And if we stop, do we lose something essential, or do we finally reclaim our authenticity? If you've ever chosen to spend your birthday alone, walking, reflecting, or simply being, you might have noticed a strange peace arising within. It's not loneliness, it's clarity. A realization that life itself is the celebration, not the date marked on a calendar. And yet beneath that peace, another truth begins to emerge, one that's even deeper and more universal. It has to do with our relationship to time itself, and how our awareness of time shapes the way we live and feel. That, as we'll see next, is the hidden key behind the psychology of those who no longer feel the need to celebrate at all. Time. It's the invisible thread that weaves our entire existence, yet no one truly understands it. We measure it, celebrate it, fear it, chase it. But what is it really? A birthday is, at its core, a ritual built around time. It says, another year has passed. But the question few dare to ask is, who is it that's aging? The body, yes. The face in the mirror, yes. But the awareness behind your eyes, has that aged at all? Think about it. You can remember being 5, 15, 30. Different faces, different lives. But something constant remains behind every version of you. The same observer, the same consciousness. That's why some people stop celebrating birthdays. Not because they don't value life, but because they begin to sense that the essence of who they are exists outside of time. This realization often arrives in midlife, when people begin to awaken from what Carl Jung called the hypnosis of youth. In our early years, we measure life in milestones: school, career, relationships, achievements. Birthdays serve as checkpoints of progress, small celebrations that say, I'm moving forward. But as we mature, something shifts. The forward motion starts to feel circular, repetitive. The outer markers lose meaning, and we begin to turn inward, searching for something more enduring, something eternal. At this stage, the birthday becomes almost symbolic of the illusion of time. The mystic Eckhart Tolle once said, "Time is not precious at all because it is an illusion. What you perceive as precious is not time, but the one point that is out of time, the now." Those who stop celebrating their birthdays may be responding, consciously or unconsciously, to this deeper truth. They begin to realize that every day, every breath, every moment of presence is a celebration of being alive. Why then reserve that feeling for one day a year? There's also another subtle reason: the discomfort with linear thinking. Modern society teaches us to view life as a line, from birth to death, from beginning to end. But psychologically and spiritually, life doesn't unfold in a straight path. It moves in cycles of growth, decay, transformation, and renewal. Ancient philosophers and indigenous cultures understood this deeply. They celebrated not the day of birth, but the eternal process of becoming. To them, every sunrise was a rebirth, every night a small death. So when someone no longer feels drawn to celebrate their birthday, it may not be sadness or detachment. It could be wisdom, the intuitive recognition that the soul doesn't fit neatly inside the human concept of age. They feel, perhaps without words, that the true self is timeless. And how does one celebrate something that never began and will never end? Yet this awareness can also bring a sense of loneliness. Because in a world obsessed with external validation, Few understand those who choose silence over celebration. Friends might interpret their choice as bitterness or indifference. Family members might worry that they're unhappy. But what they're witnessing is often a quiet form of awakening, a retreat from the superficial into the sacred. Viktor Frankl, the great psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that meaning can only be found when we confront life's deepest realities: suffering, transience, and death. For him, celebration was not about escaping these truths, but about embracing them consciously. Similarly, those who don't celebrate birthdays often aren't avoiding life. They're acknowledging it more deeply than anyone else. They sense that true celebration is not about pretending everything is joyful, but about recognizing the profound beauty of simply existing. And here's the paradox. The less they need to celebrate, the more grateful they often become. They start to find beauty in ordinary things. A quiet morning, the laughter of a friend, the sunlight on their skin. Life becomes a continuous birthday, a state of subtle reverence for the moment. But there's also a shadow side. For some, the rejection of birthdays may mask an existential fatigue, a subtle despair that says, "What's the point?" The difference between enlightenment and emptiness can be almost invisible from the outside. Both can look like stillness, but inside one lies peace and inside the other quiet pain. How can we tell the difference? It depends on the feeling behind the silence. The enlightened stillness feels full, luminous, alive. It's the silence of contentment. The empty stillness feels heavy, like a space waiting to be filled. Understanding which one you're experiencing requires deep honesty. Are you avoiding celebration because you've transcended the need for it, or because you no longer feel worthy of it? This question cuts to the heart of human psychology. Self-worth is one of the most fragile elements of our identity. For many, the birthday becomes a test of that worth. Do people remember me? Do I matter? When no one calls or when the day feels quiet, old wounds resurface, feelings of invisibility, rejection, or abandonment. These emotions often stem from childhood experiences where love was conditional, based on performance or attention. The adult self, consciously or not, relives that old pain every year. That's why birthdays can be so emotionally charged. They carry the weight of memory, identity, and the deep human need to feel seen. Not celebrating in this context becomes a form of self-protection, a way to avoid reopening the wound. But the paradox is that healing often begins when we dare to face that pain consciously, not by escaping it. What if, instead of celebrating or avoiding, we redefined what a birthday means? What if it became not a day for others to validate us, but a private ritual of self-recognition, a quiet moment to honor who we've become, what we've survived, and how far we've come? This redefinition transforms the act itself. It's no longer about candles or attention, it's about awareness. It becomes a sacred pause, a dialogue between your present self and every version of you that has ever existed. In that conversation, you realize something profound. You have always been enough, even when no one noticed. And that realization, that you are whole with or without applause, is the beginning of a new kind of freedom. But what happens when that freedom deepens? When the awareness of time, self, and existence itself dissolves into something far greater? In the final part, we'll uncover the ultimate insight, the most powerful revelation of all, one that changes not only how we see birthdays, but how we understand life itself. When we reach the deepest layers of understanding, something extraordinary happens. The boundaries between self and time begin to dissolve. The person who no longer feels the need to celebrate their birthday has often reached this silent frontier, the moment when life stops being a sequence of years and becomes a single, continuous presence. It's not apathy, it's awakening. Imagine standing on a mountain at dawn, watching the horizon glow with light. There is no past or future in that moment, only awareness. You feel alive, not because it's your birthday or because someone remembered, but because you are here. That's the hidden truth behind many who abandon the ritual of celebration. They have begun to live in the timeless dimension of the now. They no longer measure existence in years, but in presence. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "We do not come into this world, we come out of it as leaves from a tree." From this perspective, your birth wasn't the beginning of you, but the moment the universe decided to express itself as you. To celebrate that day, then, is beautiful, but to realize that every day is that miracle is something far greater. Those who don't celebrate may have touched that understanding, consciously or intuitively. They no longer feel the need to highlight a single date because the entire flow of life has become sacred. This awareness changes everything. When you stop dividing life into years, you begin to experience its continuity. You realize that every breath is both a beginning and an ending, that in each moment, something in you dies and something new is born. The body changes, the mind evolves, but the consciousness witnessing it all remains still. To that consciousness, birthdays are as irrelevant as the ticking of a clock in eternity. Carl Jung described this as the process of individuation reaching its completion, when the ego, the small I, finally bows before the self, the eternal center of the psyche. At this stage, life is no longer about achievement, validation, or time. It becomes a meditation on being. The person who once sought meaning through celebration now finds meaning in silence, in connection, in stillness. But this doesn't mean rejecting joy or human connection. On the contrary, those who have reached this level of awareness often become more compassionate, more present, more alive than ever before. They celebrate others sincerely, without expectation. They see beauty in everything, a stranger's smile, a falling leaf, the sound of rain. They live in what mystics call grace, a state where every moment is a gift. In this light, not celebrating a birthday is no longer a denial of life. It is an embrace of its totality. It's saying, I no longer need a single day to remind me that existence itself is the miracle. Yet even here, a final paradox emerges. While the enlightened mind transcends the need for celebration, the human heart still cherishes connection. And that's beautiful too, because to celebrate is human, to honor, to share, to express gratitude. The key is not to abandon celebration, but to awaken within it. To remember that the cake, the candles, the laughter, they are only symbols, not the source of joy. The real celebration is consciousness itself. This is the ultimate psychology of those who don't celebrate their birthdays. They have moved beyond the external ritual into the internal realization. Their silence is not emptiness, but fullness. The fullness of one who has recognized that time is an illusion and that being alive right now is the only true miracle worth celebrating. But what about those of us who still feel the pull of that special day? Should we stop celebrating too? Not necessarily. The message is not to abandon joy, but to deepen it, to understand why we celebrate, to transform the day from a performance into a practice of awareness. Instead of asking, who remembered me? Ask, how deeply am I living? Instead of measuring another year gone, ask, what have I awakened to in this time? Birthdays then become what they were always meant to be. Sacred pauses, moments to remember that we are travelers in time, carrying eternity within us. You can celebrate quietly with reflection or loudly with laughter. Both are beautiful if they come from consciousness, not conditioning. The problem is never the celebration itself, it's the forgetfulness behind it. And that brings us to the most powerful realization of all. The true meaning of a birthday is not that you were born once, but that you are being born now, in every breath, every choice, every awakening. To live fully is to be reborn each moment. Those who understand this have no need for dates or candles to remind them. They live as a continuous celebration of existence itself. So, the next time your birthday arrives, pause. Don't rush to plan, post, or perform. Simply breathe. Feel the life that moves through you. Ancient, infinite, mysterious. Whether you choose to celebrate or not, remember this. Your existence is already the greatest celebration the universe could ever create. Because the real question was never, why don't some people celebrate their birthdays? The real question is, how many of us truly understand what it means to be alive? Thanks for looking.